We need both of these cars ready now. The big race starts in 10 minutes.
Imagine building an entire mobile city every single week on a different continent. Garages, server rooms, a kitchen that cooks for 200 people, a hospitality suite worth more than most houses. Now imagine tearing all of it down on Sunday night, flying it 8,000 miles, and rebuilding it from scratch by Thursday morning for a race that's over in 90 minutes. This isn't a one-time event. This happens roughly 24 times a year. This is a normal week for a Formula One team, and the bill behind it will make you rethink what going racing actually means. Most people watch a Formula One race and see two cars, one trophy, and a champagne celebration. What they don't see is the operation required to get those two cars to the starting grid in the first place. An operation so large and so relentless that it makes almost every other sport on Earth look simple by comparison. A Formula One team isn't a racing team the way a football club is a sports team. It's closer to a rapid deployment logistics company that happens to build the fastest machines humans have ever raced on wheels. Let's start with the freight, because this is the part nobody thinks about when they watch a race on television. For every single race weekend, a team ships an enormous quantity of equipment around the world. Garages, toolkits, spare parts, engineering stations, computers, and the cars themselves. All of it packed into specialized freight containers and flown or trucked to the next circuit. For races within Europe, that freight typically travels by truck in convoys that can stretch for miles. For races overseas, it goes by cargo plane, and teams often need multiple chartered aircraft just to move a single team's equipment from one continent to the next. This isn't a one-time cost. It happens roughly 24 times a year, every single season, and the logistics operation required to make sure 15 tons of equipment lands in the right city, clears customs, and gets assembled inside a garage within 48 hours is itself a massive standing expense that has nothing to do with how fast the car actually goes. Now here's the detail that changes how people think about this. During what's called a triple header, 3 consecutive race weekends on 3 different continents, with no break in between, that entire logistics operation has to repeat itself in a matter of days. Pack up a paddock in Asia on Sunday night, fly everything to the Americas, rebuild an entire operational base by Thursday, race on Sunday, and do it again. The margin for error is essentially zero, because if a single freight container gets delayed at customs, an entire team can show up to a race weekend without the parts needed to build the car. Let's talk about the cars themselves, because building 2 Formula One cars for a single season is one of the most expensive engineering exercises in the world. A single power unit, the engine and hybrid energy recovery system combined, can cost several $1,000,000, and teams are only allowed a limited number of them per season before facing penalties, which means every single component has to be engineered for extreme reliability under extreme stress. The chassis, made from carbon fiber composite material, requires specialized manufacturing facilities and equipment that themselves cost tens of millions of dollars to build and maintain. And here's the part that surprises people. A car isn't built once and raced all season. It's in a constant state of evolution. Teams bring aerodynamic upgrades to races almost every few weeks. New front wings, new floor designs, new side pod configurations. Each one developed in a wind tunnel and validated through computational fluid dynamics simulations that require enormous computing power running continuously back at the factory. That brings us to the people, because a Formula One team's biggest ongoing cost isn't actually the cars, it's the workforce required to design, build, and operate them. A top-tier team can employ well over 1,000 people, most of whom never appear on television. Aerodynamicists, structural engineers, data analysts who process telemetry data streaming off the car in real time during every single lap of every single session, race strategists who calculate tire degradation models and fuel loads down to fractions of a second, mechanics who can change all 4 tires on a car in under 3 seconds, a skill that takes years of dedicated practice and drilling to perfect. Every single one of those people is a salaried employee, working year-round, whether the team is racing that particular week or not. And then there's travel. A race weekend trackside team can include over 100 personnel, engineers, mechanics, strategists, media staff, catering staff, all of whom need flights, hotel rooms, and per diem expenses for every single race. domestic or international. Multiply that by roughly 24 races a year, and the travel and accommodation budget alone for a single team's traveling staff can run into the tens of millions of dollars annually. This is before counting hospitality, because most teams also operate a corporate hospitality suite at every race, essentially a temporary luxury restaurant and lounge built and torn down at every single circuit, designed to entertain sponsors and guests. That hospitality operation has its own catering staff, its own construction crew, and its own logistics chain, completely separate from the racing operation itself. Let's talk about tires, because this is a cost category most fans never think about. Every team goes through an enormous number of tire sets across a single season: testing, practice sessions, qualifying, and the race itself. Tire compounds are engineered to degrade at specific rates depending on track temperature and surface abrasiveness, which means teams run extensive simulation and real-world testing just to understand how a specific tire compound will behave at a specific circuit under specific weather conditions. Get that wrong, and a car that was competitive in practice can fall apart in the race, costing the team not just the result, but the sponsorship value tied to a strong finish. Here's where the real financial pressure comes from. Formula One operates under a cost cap, a regulatory limit on how much a team can spend on car development and operations each season. That cap exists specifically because, before its introduction, the wealthiest teams were spending multiples of what smaller teams could afford, creating a competitive gap that made the sport increasingly predictable and, frankly, less interesting to watch. Even with the cap in place, top teams still operate close to the maximum allowed spending, which for recent seasons has been set at figures well over $100 million annually, and that cap doesn't even include driver salaries, marketing expenses, or the cost of the most senior team personnel, which are excluded from the regulation entirely. If you're enjoying learning what actually happens behind the operations everyone sees on television but nobody explains, hit subscribe, because we break down the real cost behind the world's most complex systems every single week. Let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because in this business, failure is expensive in ways that go far beyond a bad finishing position. A crash during a race weekend can destroy a chassis that took months to manufacture and cost millions of dollars to build. Teams carry spare parts to every race specifically because of this risk. Spare front wings, spare floors, sometimes an entire spare chassis, all of which has to be transported, stored, and maintained regardless of whether it's ever actually used that weekend. A significant crash can force a team to fly emergency replacement parts from the factory to the circuit within hours, using expedited freight services that cost dramatically more than standard shipping, simply because a car that can't be repaired in time means an entire weekend's worth of the operational cost. Freight, staff, hospitality, all of it is spent for zero result. Then there's the factory itself, which most fans never think about because it's not part of the televised spectacle. A modern Formula One team's headquarters includes wind tunnels, some of the most expensive and precise pieces of engineering equipment on the planet, capable of testing scale models of the car at various speeds to refine aerodynamic performance. Running a wind tunnel facility 24 hours a day, which many teams do, requires enormous amounts of electricity and a dedicated technical staff, and that facility operates continuously throughout the season, generating cost every single day, whether the car is racing that weekend or sitting in a garage on the other side of the world. Let's put a full season together, because that's where the real scale becomes clear. Between the cost-capped car development budget, which alone runs well over $100 million for a top team, driver salaries that for elite drivers can run into the tens of millions annually, staff payroll for over 1,000 employees, freight and logistics across roughly 24 race weekends, hospitality operations at every circuit, and the uncapped costs of senior management and marketing, a top Formula One team's total annual operating cost can exceed several $100 million. That's not the cost to start a team. That's the cost to simply keep one competitive team running for a single season, win or lose. So why does anyone spend this kind of money on a sport where, in any given race, only one team actually wins? Because the return isn't just about trophies. Formula One sponsorship and branding rights are worth enormous sums to global companies because a team's cars and drivers are broadcast to hundreds of millions of viewers across dozens of countries throughout the season. A logo on a car isn't just advertising, it's a demonstration of engineering credibility, because if your brand is associated with a machine capable of surviving the extreme stresses of Formula One competition, that association carries weight in markets that have nothing to do with racing at all. The operational cost isn't just about winning races. It's about maintaining a permanent global stage 24 times a year in front of an audience that most other sports can only dream of reaching. So the next time you watch a Formula One race and see two cars cross the finish line in under 2 hours, remember what you're actually looking at. You're looking at the visible tip of a 1,000-person engineering operation, a logistics chain moving 15 tons of equipment across continents on a weekly basis, a wind tunnel running continuously back at the factory, and a cost structure so large that entire regulations exist just to keep it from spiraling completely out of control. The race is 90 minutes. The operation behind it never stops. Disclaimer: this content is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Operational costs are estimates based on available data.